All right, I'd like to welcome everyone to today's webinar, Value Stream Mapping, Understanding the Current State. My name is Tony Manis with 5S Supply, and a little bit about my background. I've just thought about it. I've been doing value stream maps for almost 15 years now, and I'm sure I've probably done over 100 maps. So one of the things is I'll kind of walk you through some of the tips or tricks I picked up during the years to kind of make this easier. So what we're going to do is we'll take a deeper look on how to do a current state map, and I'm going to try to give you practical information. Our learning objectives is how to understand the difference between data collection and manufacturing versus office, service, or support functions, how to actually create the current state map, and at the end I'll try to show you some real-world examples. They might not be real detailed, and that's not the intent, but just to kind of give you a little flavor for what you might be able to see in the future. All right, so let's start with our first polling question here. How would you rate your expertise with value stream mapping? I've not created a value stream map before. I'm a new or beginner. I've done it a couple of maps, or I'm a seasoned pro. And so I do appreciate that. There's only a couple of polling questions during this session, but this gives us a little flavor for who's in attendance today and how we can gear it. Okay. Wow, I got to tell you, it's pretty interesting because so far it's almost been an even split between the first three answers, so we really do appreciate that. So first thing I want to talk about is a little bit about process families. So I do have another polling question for you here. Do you use product families or process family matrix when you create your value stream maps? And I just wanted to find out, no, never done them, or don't really use that as part of our tools. Yes, we do use them, or three sometimes. And I guess one of the questions would be, if you don't know what it is, you're probably not using it. Now, if you notice, it says product family matrix, and that's in the book, the classic book, Learning to See, by John Shook and Mike Rother. But if you notice in parentheses, I put process. So a lot of times I'll use the term process family matrix instead, especially when it comes to service organizations and groups like that. Okay, so we're pretty close there. We've got a lot of people doing it. So, but by far the majority say no. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. Thank you very much for participating in that. And the thing is, what I really want to let you know is you probably should be doing the process family matrix, or at least in the beginning, so you understand the concept a little bit better. So what do we do there, product family matrix or process family matrix? What you do is you look at the different processing steps that you're going to map. And then you look at the products or services that go through that same processing steps. And these we typically end up calling process families. If you skip the step or want to take shortcuts, my advice would be don't. Anything you do after this might seem hard or difficult the first couple times through, but if you don't do this, maybe anything you do after might be a little bit tougher. So I say take the time to complete it, even if you have a lot of products or services that you offer. And so what we'll do is I'll kind of walk you through real quick. What we want to do is describe the scope of what you're trying to look at in basically 10 to 15 steps. 10 to 15, 10's a good number because if you tell them 10, they usually try to creep up to 15 anyway. I used to say 15 because that was the most I ever wanted, and of course then it would get about 20. But these are what are the physical things that you're doing, and you need to try to keep these at the same level. Meaning, if we're doing a door-to-door value stream map, raw material comes in, finished goods go out, try to keep the processing steps the same. It's almost a little bit like a Dilbert cartoon, tell me everything that you do, from beginning to end, but you only get 10 steps to say it in. All right. Sometimes understanding your products or services, the volumes might help. We just put an X in the matrix to make sure that you let us know, hey, it actually goes through that step. Then we group them into families, name a family, and then we'll actually select one of those to actually map out. Okay. So once again, I'm going to show you some examples. I know that it probably won't fit your exact situation, but I just kind of wanted to give you some examples of what it might look like. And once again, don't get too lost in the details. This is what companies have done. Doesn't mean it fits exactly for you, but the key element or takeaway is just think how this applies to your specific instance. So here's was one of our classic examples of process family, and this was a manufacturer that did things like metal stamping. So across the top, we ask them, hey, write down all the things that you do, from beginning to end across the top, on all the different steps. And so they put those across the top, and then they say, okay, what products do you make? And they put the products down the side. We also ask them for the quantities, and then we put an X in the box if it actually goes through that step. So if it goes through that step, then we actually put an X to the box. So if you look at it, you'll see the processes going across the top, and you'll see the products or the services going down the side. And then what we did was we grouped them together. Don't worry about the color coding. That was just to make them stand out when we were doing it. And from there, you can see how many different product families a company would actually have. Okay, so that's a quick example. So once again, we look for things that go through the same or similar steps. It's by the process, not the product. So don't always think just because you named a product something. We're really looking for what steps it go through. The volumes or quantities might help you determine, hey, this is a low volume runner. We really shouldn't include it in the process family. Or, this is a low volume runner. It doesn't matter if we include it in. All right. So once again, make sure you understand, too, that just because it's a customer, a lot of times people call their process families or their product families by their customer, but it's really by the process itself. All right. Now, would you have a value stream map for every single product family you have? Probably not. But I'm sure within having a few of them under your belt, you'll see did we cover most of the things that we needed to. So here's an example of service process families. So this happened to be in a customer service department. So these are all the different processing steps that they had, from technical service requests, submitting the process information, all the way down to data entry, et cetera, et cetera. And then what they did here, this is an ERP example here, where they had to add in more information for the ERP system. And what we did is we found out that even within this small process here, it had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different process families to look at. So some quick tips. We usually put an X in the box if it goes through that step. And one of the ways I'll say that is if it always goes through that step or almost always goes through that step, go ahead and put a big X there. All right. If it sometimes goes through that step or mostly goes through that step, sometimes we just use a little X. By the way, none of these are required. An X is fine. It's just one of the tips that we learned over the years to kind of make it easier to see the different parts of the processes. And sometimes we'll actually put the number in this step because as you're going across the top of the box, you're trying to follow the same, like a linearity type of format, but it doesn't always flow that way. So especially when it comes to job shops or things like that, sometimes we found putting the number in the box, meaning this is step 1, this is process 2, this is process 3, was a better way to see it. And other times we put P for primary, S for secondary, or O for optional. But we usually reserve those only for very special cases. All right, so it might be hard to kind of decide what is a process, what's not. Do we combine two processes together? Do we split them apart? One of the tips or tricks I would give you, especially when you're trying to do this in an office area, so let's say someone says, well, I enter the information and then I print it out, and so they think it's two different steps, entering the information and printing it out. So I'll ask them, do you leave your desk? No. Is there a large gap in time between those two steps? No. Well, then basically it's one step. It's entering the information and printing. So it's one step at that time. So that's kind of a little key tip or trick. Another thing for manufacturers is you might have to look at the equipment. Let's say it's a small stamping press or a large stamping press, or things like that, and maybe some of the different options of the equipment that you could run it on. So once again, your team will know how to do this the best. It definitely gets easier with time, but please don't skip it. All right. So here's some examples. Once again, the details aren't important. But I just wanted to show you a different one. So we have one for the ERP, a computer system coding, like when new products have to go into it, new product development, customer service, actually a mining operation, ID department. Okay, so here's a ERP coding system. You saw that. So it has the different things that they have to do across the top. But if you notice, not all of them have to go through that. Not all of them have to go through the same steps. So you see like a big gap in here, in this area here. None of these go through this. There's a little gap here and gaps here, so they said, hey, that's close enough. Now, if you notice, this one has an X above it but doesn't below, but they said, once again, that's close enough. We can live with that. We can use that as our process family matrix, and it'll be fine. Okay. So here's another example, new product development. once again, this is an example meaning, hey, we got to create something from new. If you notice too, even though there's new product development, they had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different types of process families going through it. Everything from it's a full-blown thing to something more of like, it's just an existing product, and all we have to do is kind of change it a little bit. Here's the customer service one, trying to deal with complaints. If you ask a customer service department, how many different types of complaints would you get? They might say thousands, unfortunately. But in this case, what we did is we kind of grouped them. Now, how do you take care of it? So we had things like general inquiries, and if you notice, they just go through these steps in the beginning here. And then the next level up, there's some secondary processes, so they had some X's in that area there. High risk, we've got some of these here. Property damage, and then just like a standard complaint. So, even though this company, if you ask them, how many different kind of complaints, thousands, well, it really boils down to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different types. Here's one for doing a mining operation. Once again, going through much of the a portion of the processing, but there's definitely things that didn't go through some of the processing steps, and they call that like a byproduct. Okay, and then there's other ways that they handle these things. So what we do is we look at this real quick so we can decide, hey, which is the map we want to do. And here's an IT department. This was a large multinational company, very complex. They kind of violated my rule of 10 to 15 boxes across the top, but they were really insistent that they had this many processing steps. Once again, the color coding not required at all. We just did it to make it easier to kind of see the different process families. So once again, why you might pick one process family over another, biggest bang for the buck, biggest impact, those types of things, highest probability for success, especially when you're first starting out, even if it's a new product, meaning that it doesn't exist. You're like, well, how can we do a value stream map? Well, what you do is you look at what you currently have, and then decide, okay, that might be our current state. What's our future state? This is what we're going to implement before we actually get there. So let's talk a little bit about which data to collect. What we're going to do is typically when you do this first way, especially when you're in training, is we usually have a small team, about 5 to 10 members, about 7 is a good size, and we actually go out and walk the flow and go collect the data. When you get more experience at this, you'll be able to kind of collect the data and draw at the same time. But when we're first training people, all we do is just go out, collect the data on data sheets, and then go back in the room and actually do the drawing. So here's a quick polling question. Do you walk your flow to go gather data? We've had this happen before where people ask me, hey, Tony, we have all the data on the computer. Can we just, sit in the room and draw the map up? So the good news is most of you, the majority, definitely walk the flow. And a portion of you only sometimes do it. But one of the things is whenever it's feasible or actually possible, then we really do want you to go out and see. So walk in the flow. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to walk the flow. That way we can actually go look for things like wastes. It's better to go visually see, go to Gemba where the actual work is being done. But you might be able to use some other tools like spaghetti diagrams or circle diagrams to kind of give you a little bit more information about what's going on in your areas. Typically what we'll do is a review of what the 8 wastes of lean are, all right, including overproduction, motion, inventory, transportation, waiting, underutilized people, defects, and overprocessing. And I realize you might have a 7 waste, 7 deadly wastes, which is fine, or 8. I'm sure they're going to be very similar to those. And what we typically do is based on which type of value stream map we're doing, if it's office or service, we'll try to relate those types of weights specifically back to them. Another tool is just doing spaghetti diagram. When you're going through, how much are you actually walking? Just is it the paperwork? Is it the materials? Where are these things actually going? So here's an example of, you look at people movement, which is motion waste. The material movement could be transportation waste, and then information flow. So sometimes we'll actually capture all 3 on the same map. We'll just use either different color pens or dash lines or dotted lines or something like that. But that's just kind of a way to let us know, well, how much is this all traveling here? All right, now circle diagram is another tool that we might actually use. and it shows our handoffs between the different groups. These are especially helpful in the office areas or service areas because every time you hand something off, typically there's going to be a delay. So what we do is you just across the top you put down what department or person or area it's in, and then every time it moves to somewhere else you draw another line to connect it up, and we try to look for how many different handoffs there are. And so what we do is just as it bounces around and kind of moves from one area to another, we just try to put where's it going, who's getting it, and then maybe some of the delays that go along with it. Okay. So once again, sometimes they don't want to do it, but we definitely want to go see. It's better for you to see it yourself. It's not like you don't trust the people, but it's also the place where we do our interviews. All right. Now, if you're doing a higher level value stream map or an extended value stream map with your suppliers, your customers, and your customers' customers, it might not be practical to actually do the walk. So typically what you do is you might have to either do it by conference call or go visit a location, but that's probably one of the only times that you wouldn't be able to get the walk in and be able to get these things done. All right. So when it comes down to getting the data and information, we don't really rely on the engineering standards, whatever the computer says. We like to go check ourselves. And what I usually try to say is if the number's close enough that if it's in the ballpark, that'll be okay. And so the example would be if you ask somebody a question of like, how many do you do per week? And if they said 10 and you found out later it was really 20, well, then we weren't in the ballpark. If they said 10 and ended up being 9 or something, that was close enough, especially at this level. When we do the interviews, obviously we explain, hey, we're doing some value stream mapping. We're just here to gather some data and information. There's no wrong answers. But you got to get ready for the "it depends" answer. It depends. I joke around that if I had a nickel for every time I heard that term, it depends, I could have retired by now. Because a lot of times people aren't used to asking questions like this before. It's like, well, how many do you do per week? Well, it depends. How long does it take? It depends. And we joke around because we prepare the team before we go out. You're going to hear this answer all the time. So just be prepared for it. The it depends answer is kind of just their way to say that there's a lot of variation in there. So what we'll try to do is ask for either a range or average or typical, and that'll help reduce the it depends answer. Now, usually there's someone in the group that wants to count up how many times they hear it depends, or the first time we hear it, everyone laughs because I warn them ahead of time. You're going to hear this a lot. The thing is, it depends, and we understand that it can, but that's not really an answer or an answer that we would use in value stream mapping. We really kind of need some data and information to make it work. So one of my favorite it depends answers of all times was, well, it depends. And I said, well, why? Because if it's the third Thursday of the month, after 2 p.m., I have to do it this way. I'm like, wow, that was very specific. So I was really kind of shocked at like, why did they have so many exceptions versus the rule? So let's talk a little bit about the type of information to collect. What you'll see is some of the things will be similar for office and support areas or service organizations with manufacturing, but sometimes we'll just give them a different name. In manufacturing, the cycle time of the equipment is a very common one. So what we'll do is we'll call that processing time in office areas. And processing time is kind of, we call this fantasy land in the office areas, and I'll say it this way. If everyone left you alone, you had no interruptions, you had all the information that you needed, how long would this take? And they go, for me, yes, well, it depends. And so we have to have a laugh. But anyway, it's kind of like best case, and I call this fantasy land or best case scenario. The next thing we'll look at for office is accurate and complete, or in the books it's also known as complete and accurate percentage. When you get the materials in for paperwork, how many out of 10 do you have all the information in that's correct? The thing about this term is it's not two separate terms, because if it's not accurate and complete, then it is a defect, and that would be equivalent to our first pass yield in the manufacturing area. One of the ones that we use, it's not in any book, but we've found that be helpful, is priority. How does a person prioritize their work? It could be FIFO, first in, first out. It could be hot orders first. It could be, whoever I like the best, my favorite customer or favorite salesman, or whichever the one the boss is yelling the loudest. Quantities, once again, per day, per week, per shift, anything like that. Another one that we've added in that you don't see in books or anywhere else is just what we call difficulty. How would you rate this task on a scale of 1 to 5? 1 is easy and 5 is hard. We only do this for office areas just to kind of give a feeling for what the task is like. And then we also ask, what about for a person in training? And so we'd like to compare those two numbers because that'll give us an indication maybe of standardized work as needed. We'll also capture things like lead time and queue time. And common ones for manufacturers include cycle time, changeover from last good piece to the next good piece, reliability of equipment, or uptime, or downtime, or OEE, over equipment effectiveness if you have it. First pass yield for quality, quantity per, and then inventory levels. Those are all helpful ones. So, and then here we go, a couple other ones. A little definition for lead time in the office from the time it comes into your box until the time it moves on. Now, different authors might call it a different way, but this is the way that that we use it. There's a queue time, or time that it sits. In the book, The Complete Lean Enterprise, they'll draw an inbox, and that makes sense for the office. I'm just too lazy, so we use the inventory symbol with a Q for queue or waiting. And once again, processing time, fantasy time, accurate, complete, priority, quantity, and difficult. 1 is easy and 5 is hard. 1's like filling out a vacation request, 5's like doing your taxes. So here's what I'd like to do to kind of show what we use as the definition of lead time, especially in the office area. So from the time it comes in till the time it goes out, that's the total lead time. That's the all thing. So now it sits for a little bit before you actually work on it. We call that queue time. Once again, the other books will have inboxes there to show, hey, it comes in and it sits. Now, when we ask people how long it might sit before they work on it, it goes, oh, it doesn't sit at all. I work on it right away. And I kind of laugh at that answer because, hey, what if you're not at your desk? What if you're in a meeting? What if you're at lunch? So sometimes there's a little bit, it usually does sit. Sometimes we'll see longer sitting time because it actually might sit there until the next day before they actually truly start to work on it. And that's our definition. The queue time doesn't count if it's an email and you just open it up and then you close it back out and you're not doing anything on it. You actually have to really start to work on it. So now we actually work on it, and this is what we call the processing time. Okay, but I work on it for a little bit, but then I get stopped. Why? Maybe I got interrupted. And then I get to work on it a little bit more, and I stop. Why? It might have been a phone call. Work on it a little bit more. Oh, now I'm missing some information, and I have to call somebody back or shoot out an email, and then I work on it, continue on. So I finally get it done, and I move it on. And so remember, the processing time, if you added all those together, that would be the actual work content. And so lead time is the queue time, time it sits around, plus all the processing time, and then everything else is waste. All right, these are all the things that are stealing your time, your energy, your effort, your money to get this through. So this is one of the things I really love to work with companies and organizations, is show them one of the easiest ways to reduce the lead time is just pull out some of the waste, pull out those gaps in between. I didn't make anyone work any harder. I didn't make any of the processing time faster. I can't tell someone, hey, type faster. That doesn't work. So we could still reduce the lead time by reducing things like waste and the queue time. So hopefully that's a tip or trick that you can use too. So once again, in the manufacturing areas, we'll look for how much inventory or WIP is sitting around, finished goods or raw materials, the cycle time of equipment, changeover on the equipment, reliability of the equipment, and once again, you can substitute uptime or downtime or OEE, first pass yield and quantity. Plus, we usually want to know the number of operators and operators per shift. And so information might include information flow, hard copy, which is usually just a straight arrow, electronic information, which the old days EDI, fax, emails, phones, what software you might use, and then when you move stuff around, is it planes, trains, and automobiles? How far does it travel? Sometimes costs, expediting costs, on-time delivery. We don't always use those, but if it does make sense, sometimes we'll add those in. When it comes to your customers and suppliers, who are just the main ones? You don't have to list out all 200. Just give us a couple of names so that we kind of get a good representation. What do they provide, quantity, and then the service level can be, how well do they react to your needs, and that could be maybe something as simple as a letter grade. And then once again, operators per shift. If you use a Kanban system currently, a pull system, supermarkets, we'd use symbols for those. Okay. So while we're out there walking the flow, and two different methodologies. One, say start closest to the customer, which they would say at the shipping dock, and work your way backwards. That kind of makes sense because that's the downstream process and you're working your way towards the upstream process. Another way to do it is actually start on the first step and go all the way through. I've done them both, and each of them have their pluses and minuses, so find one that'll work for you. So when it comes to interviews, make sure you understand that it's really about listening, what the people actually have to say. What we typically do is we give everyone on the team an opportunity to do the interview, so that way they know how to do this later. Okay. We try to keep the entire group together because if they split in a smaller group, sometimes you won't hear the same information. Now, what I usually say, if you're the manager or supervisor of the area and you're on the value stream mapping team, just please be quiet and listen. Do not interrupt the interviewee, and please don't answer for them or leading answer. Something like, we do 10 of these a day, don't we? So what's the person going to say at that point? Yeah, I guess so. So usually if you're the manager or supervisor of that area, we have you stand in the back and just listen. You'll hear amazing things, what people say, and it's their reality. So let's be respectful when we're out there. Okay, so things to remember: no wrong answers. There's definitely answers that are better than others. Sometimes it might be like pinning down a watermelon seed where they just can't answer the question. So sometimes we have to rephrase it. After a while, sometimes we just start asking different questions to get their mind off of that one. Make sure you put them at ease, show respect, introduce yourselves. Definitely try to contact people ahead of time to let them know that you're going to be traipsing through with your clipboards, asking all these questions. Explain what you're doing. And you can always just say, we're just doing a value stream map, or we're training and learning how to do value stream mapping. The data collection sheets we use, and I know Mike and Karen show Post-it note method. We don't read directly off the data collection sheet. We want it to be more like just listening and hearing a story that they say, and then typically they're going to be giving you all sorts of answers, and you didn't even have to ask for them yet. Okay, so once again, it's their reality. People have a hard time with this because maybe they've never been asked these kind of questions before. How many do you do per day? How long does this take? So they might be a little bit nervous. Once again, just be aware of the Hawthorne effect, meaning that sometimes people, because you're paying attention to them, they might change their answers slightly. They might either try to sandbag it and give you like worst case, or they might try to impress you and try to give you the best case. But we're really looking for average or typical. Okay. Once again, don't badger the interviewee. I've seen people just go after somebody to try to get the answer for it. I'm kind of like, put yourself in their shoes. It's like, how would you feel if people are attacking you, trying to get just one data point? Make sure that they feel comfortable about it. Especially, like I said, if you have people with clipboards or Post-it notes traipsing through the office grabbing this information, then definitely thank them when you're done. Okay. Put them at ease. Once again, we usually say it's a training event, so it kind of puts more of the shouldering the burden on the team versus the person. Okay, and then tell them, hey, we're walking the flow from end to end, or through the department, or through the area, and just give us your answers the best that you can. Okay, and remember, it's more of a conversation. Should we kind of allow them to kind of tell a story, and then ask them to just briefly explain the process. And I used to say Reader's Digest version, but a lot of people didn't know that one, so we started saying Clip Notes version of what you guys actually have to do. Here's another tip or trick of the trade. If they go to reach for the mouse, if this is an office area, and they want to start to show you screens, I usually stop them. We don't really always need to know at that level of detail while we're there. We can always come back later. But if they could just tell us, that would be fine. So that's just one of the tips or tricks I found. And then listen. You'll surprise that once again they'll probably even answer some of the questions you haven't asked, and they're going to actually tell you a lot of things that are going wrong, or maybe give you ideas for improvement. So those are the things that we're going to try to look for. Okay, so make sure you let them know ahead of time that you're going to be coming through. So we usually like to have a little communication plan. Make sure that they know that you're going to take a little time. In the interviews, depending on how quickly they can answer, can take anywhere from 10 minutes to half an hour. But usually we try to reserve enough time to get through all the interviews in the day. And remember, get ready for it. The "it depends" answer. How many? It depends. How long? It depends. All right. And then what I do with the teams is usually we hold a coaching moment after the interview, and we even tell the interviewee, "Hey, hang on a second, we're just doing a coaching moment with the rest of the team members, and we just review the data and the information that we collect." I just typically like to do it right then and there, so that We don't have to try to guess, a couple hours later, what did we actually hear. And this also allows people to start to see, how are we coming up with this information? I heard this number. Oh, I heard it this way. Okay, well, it gives us a chance to discuss it and clarify it real quickly with the person, since we're right there. All right, so here's an example of our data collection sheet that we use. We put the different processes across the top, and that's like from the product family matrix. We have our little symbols in place, and the different types of data we're going to collect, like lead time and processing time, etc. We usually capture the name of the person so we can thank them later, and then just go through and collect the data. And then any notes. Usually I have scribbles all over my sheets everywhere. This because I'm trying to think ahead of how this might get drawn. So I'll put down little notes and start drawing out what I think the map would look like. But once again, this is just a tool to capture the information so we can go back and draw it. Once you have enough experience, you might not have to do it this way in the future. And so we got the data. Now let's go draw the map. So here's another polling question. All right, so how do you draw your maps? Do you do it with paper and pencil, Post-it notes, or software, other? This time you're allowed to click as many as you want. So it looks like the majority use paper and pencil, so thank you very much. That's my particular preferred method. A close second is the Post-it note method, and then about a third of you actually would use software. And I understand, based on the situation or time, you might be doing it different ways at different time. Okay. So once again, my preferred method, especially when it's training or in the beginning, is to use paper and pencil. Post-it notes are okay, but I think if people learn how to do it in paper and pencil, this came to light for me, especially one time when we were having a problem out in the production area, and me and the supervisor just walked over to a dry erase board, and we just started to map it out. All right, that's a little bit different than saying, hang on a second, let me go get Post-it notes, or hang on a second, I got to go get my computer and call up the software to get it done. The way I feel about it is, if people truly know value stream mapping, they know how to draw with paper and pencil, those will be your value stream mapping champions. The other methods are fine for participants, the Post-it notes. And then software is usually really good if you need to share it over distances. But we say don't waste your time putting in the software if it's just to make it look prettier. That's could be a non-value added step. All right, so when it comes to drawing the maps, okay, I'll say no two maps will look the same. And the way, if you gave me the same data and I even walked the flow and you had to have me draw it on a different day, it might look different. It's not about, there's some conventions that we'll definitely follow, but it's really more about how we're communicating, right? And then don't get too lost in the details. That's one of the things we have to tell people. So there's definitely the standards value stream mapping symbols that we'll show you here in a second, and those are the ones you'll see in the different books. Obviously, they're simple, easy to understand. It's kind of like playing Pictionary, so I'll be honest, there's sometimes we actually had to create a couple of different symbols. This one here, a pair of dice, that was because the company's like, oh, Tony, it's a crapshoot. We don't know what's going to happen. Here's another one. This was very hard. They asked me if I would draw a turtle, and this had to do with their computer system because it was very slow. This one here, this was fun because it looks like a little crystal ball, and that was about how they did their forecasting. All right, and a couple here is a little stick figure. That person's probably hurrying, and this person's probably having a hard time and frustrated. But the zigzag line, and it just means electronic version of something. Zigzag line with question marks, that was one of my favorites. That's when the customer would call up and go, where's my order? And they would say, what order? Meaning that they never received it, or they didn't get it, or it got lost somewhere. So those are some fun ones. Probably every value stream mapping event might have to create something new, but these are non-standard ones, but these most people would understand them. These are, we're getting to more of the standard symbols that you would get used to. So the first thing that, to make sure that you understand is when it comes to drawing these things, what we do is we have the process box. Remember, it's the process itself. So sometimes we'll put down the department and then what software they use. And then we make a little gap, and then underneath it we put the data box, and the data box is here. And what we do is we put the little feed at the bottom so we can continue it on. I know a lot of times the number of people people put that in the top in the process box, and that's fine. One of the tricks of the trade is when you're drawing your boxes across, whatever order you start in, continue in that same order to make it easier to read. And so here's examples for manufacturing process. Okay, a supplier outside warehouses, and this looks like the old style factories here. Okay. And things like a warehouse, we just use this as a symbol, or cross-docking, which you would see in books, but doesn't always come up with different groups that actually have to do their value stream map. So here's some additional symbols here. A person is just a stick figure. By the way, that was probably one of my favorite things I ever heard was like, "Hey Tony, how come you're always drawing guys?" And I'm like, "Well, it's a stick figure. I can't tell what it is." But one of the questions was, "Why do you always draw the hats?" I said, "Oh, that's a good question." And I believe if you notice a lot of times when Toyota, and what they'll do is hand drawings of things, and the operator might just have a cap on, but the supervisor would probably have a stripe on their cap, and I think that's kind of why they have it. So once again, you have things like hard copy information and electronic. We just added these in just to kind of explain in a little bit more detail, hot list, expediting. And then the glasses are to go see, I go look myself. Okay, movement of material flow is just usually straight arrow. If it's a push, it has tiger stripes on it. And then different types of trucks. People ask, do we have to draw a semi? I'm like, no, not at all. Just planes, trains, and automobiles. The company did ask, can you show the UPS type service? And then the lines at the back meant that we were paying a lot for expediting costs. So those are just some examples. Once again, not standard or not required, but just things we picked up over the years to get it done. So additional ones, including things like a supermarket and Kanban systems, Hijunka or level loading, the loops, the Kaizen burst, just means opportunity for improvement. And then what we do is we add up value-added time and non-value-added time. And then just a title box in the corner. All right, so here we're going to do is a real quick one for manufacturing. We'll start with 11 by 17 paper, pencil, and a big eraser. We'll go through the customer, supplier, material flow, information flow, and then the time calculations. So the way this will look is if this screen now is your blank 11 by 17 paper. So here we go, 11 by 17. All right, so this is the way we lay it out. The customer in the upper right, supplier in the upper left. Information flow actually going right to left, but the material flow goes left to right. And then we leave gutters in the top and the bottom for the lead times and processing times. So here's a quick case study. We just use this during our training, and this is you might be familiar with different type of lean training simulations, and ours is for doing paper airplanes. So anyway, here's a super fast build a value stream map. You see it just flashing up on your screen there, and bam, there you go. Now, once again, it's just a case study, and boy, I wish it would be that quick to draw it up, but it takes a little bit longer. But this is just kind of our way to kind of show what's happening. And once again, you have the customer in the upper right-hand corner, information flow going in through sales and then scheduling. We have our supplier that delivers by truck weekly, and then it goes through our different stages of punching, folding, fold 1, 2, 3, and the QC test. We have schedules that get walked out by hand. So for this case study, the total lead time in the manufacturing area was 20 days with only 95 seconds of work. And then in the office areas, it's 3 days to get it through. It's only 90 minutes of work. So once again, this is just a quick case study that we use. Real maps will look a little bit different. I probably have more boxes. Once again, probably about that 10 to 15. Okay. Once again, don't forget to put the timeline across the office or function areas there. And once again, if you're doing things in warehouse and QC, it might be a hybrid of data points because warehouse typically is using product, but they're also doing enough paperwork. All right. And then once again, you might need separate data points for the same process just to make it, like based on what you're trying to capture. So this might be like a standard process box here. Right? Just what is the process? What's our QC test? How many operators? One person does it, but we have a backup, and then the data box underneath it. Now, the thing is, well, what if some of the data points are a lot different when we're asking the questions? So one of the tricks of the trade that we do for this is what we can do is, an example here was the lead time might be different for product A than product B. So what we do is we just, list it, lead time for A, lead time for B, and if you notice, all the data, all the rest of the information would be the same. But let's say there's two main products that are still in that same process family, and but they have a lot of different data points. So what we might have to do is do a third way where we actually put two data boxes right one next to each other because the data points are so different. If you look at the lead times, processing time only 2 minutes versus 2 hours, accurate and complete of the information coming in, et cetera, et cetera. So this is one of the ways, it's a trick of the trade that we use to be able to get the information that we need, especially since you're doing it by process family. Okay, so here's a service one for doing it in the service area. That other one was a manufacturing. So let's go look through this again. So once again, the difference here is that the information flow typically is just left to right, and you don't have to go across the top and then back down the bottom. But sometimes what we'll do is we'll use swim lanes for any time it leaves a department and goes to another area. Okay, so once again, it's just left to right. Okay, and then the handoffs are the swim lanes portion of it. Okay, so we'll give you a couple of examples. For current state maps. 30,000 foot view in manufacturing, 10,000 foot view in purchasing, engineering, etc. And then even a supply chain example. So here we go. So here's a manufacturing example where you have the information flow across the top and material flow going across the bottom. So you see, and this is a current state map with a lot of push arrows on it. You see trucks going up on to your customers, trucks coming down from the suppliers, different levels, different things going on in that area. So that's what the map looks like. You can even see people having a conversation here, the computer system. Here's a person with a cape because they're saving the day. All right. One of the other things that might be helpful is like anytime something that might go through two different process areas, you can maybe put a percentage of, what percent goes one way, what percent goes the other. Okay. All right, so here's an example for a purchasing department, and what we did here is you can see there's a dashed line in the center because there's basically 3 different ways to take care of it. So the information started here, goes through the processing steps, some other information comes here, combines. Some of it comes down this way and then goes out to an office area. The rest of it follows all the way through. They get the data in, comes up, comes out, comes in, comes out, and then finally gets generated to a lot of different places there. Here's a simpler one. Then material comes in, comes out. All right. So what we did is we put all these maps all on the same page because it was all for that same purchasing process. Here's one for an engineering function purchasing. The interesting part was the engineering function was written in the map, but was only maybe like 2 blocks in the map. The rest was all the things that the engineers had to do. Now, as you can see, this does have a lot of boxes on it. Probably maybe a little bit too many than there should be. But it did give them a good complete picture of what they were trying to do. It was a very complex process, so that worked out for them. Here's one that was a report generation process. You can see step by step by step as it keeps going through the process steps here. And then what this was a subtask that would feed back up into this one. So there was another group working on other parts of the report, and it would feed back through. Okay. And then here's one for receiving. We broke this one into swim lanes, and swim lanes are, the material flow across the top, where the material comes in, okay, and comes through, material comes across here. This was actually starting the paperwork here and getting the materials actually done, and then this was a lot of the office function, getting the materials back, the paperwork back out to the receiving area. This one was for shipping. I just wanted to blow this one up on the map large here because I just thought this was a very fun one to kind of draw. What this is supposed to be an indicator, this is just the blown up version of this area here. What happened is, if you can kind of tell, this person's going down a staircase, so they're walking down the stairs, they ring a bell, and then they yell out, "Hey, we got it!" The person would pick it up from the bin, walk it over, and then start there. And this person here, you might be able to tell just from the little figure here, but that was a person making copies. So once again, non-standard value stream mapping symbols, but it did work to actually communicate what we were trying to do. So here's a 60,000 foot level one with supply chain, where you're just kind of in the middle here. You're just the one portion of the entire supply chain. So this would be, your portion of it. And once again, you notice you only have one box. And then here's dealing with different suppliers. So you have different suppliers in here that are trying to get things done, and they're trying to get you the materials that you need. All right, and you can see as it all kind of flows through, and then finally out to the ultimate customer. So that's like a 60,000 foot view map. Okay, so remember, current state means the way you guys do it today. Okay, that's one of the questions that'll come up. It's like, yeah, but the inventory we have on hand today is a little bit higher than normal. Well, that's fine. If it's not too bad. If you need to normalize it, feel free. There's no perfect map, and don't waste your time creating the perfect map and things like software, etc. if you don't really need to. If you think about it, the map is really temporary anyway. Hopefully within a few months, 6 months or so, the map is really just done. You've already moved on to your future state anyway, so don't have to waste a lot of time putting it together. Make sure it communicates visually, and that's what you're trying to do. And I love the paper and pencil. All right. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and kind of get it open for questions here. Okay. All right. So once again, we took a deeper look at the current state. I tried to give you some practical information about how to go get the data and how to draw it, and different information you collect for data in the manufacturing versus service industries. Right? How to create the map itself, and then I tried to show you some real-world examples. Okay, and then here's some additional resources. The Learning to See book is probably where a lot of people first found value stream mapping. First started in 1998 and 99 wider distribution, so it's been around for a while. And then there's a companion book called The Complete Lean Enterprise, which I think they did a great job of tacking on the office portion onto the case study and Learning to See. And then if you want to extended value stream map, look at Seeing the Whole, and there's some other videos and DVDs out there that you can watch. Okay, so I'll go ahead and open it up for questions. All right, at this time, just go ahead and type them in the question area there. And if I don't get your question today, you can always just forward it to me at tmanis@5ssupply.com. So, hey, some of the questions, and of course these questions do come up. People ask, hey, can we get a copy of the presentation and the forms? And yes, we can make those available for you. Unfortunately, it's not going to be the PowerPoint version, but we can get you the PDF version of that. And once again, we're glad to do that, including the data collection sheet that we use. Okay, one of the questions that came up is about doing the handoffs on the Office version. With the swim lane map, it's kind of a nice way to kind of do it. That way you can kind of show when it leaves one area and goes to another, because typically that's when it's going to be a delay. All right. One of the times we found that it would go to the manager and everyone thought it was for the approval, and the manager was on the team. He goes, well, I'm not really approving anything. I'm just taking a look at it. So we found out that that whole step could have been just eliminated, that he can just be kind of given some information later, and that would have been fine. So those are some of the gems that you find out just by looking at where's things going, how's it coming out, those types of things. So that's kind of a nice way to have it. Okay, the question was about the data points that we collected. The ones that I showed you today are ones that we like to use a lot, but those might not be the exact same ones you would see in the different books or different references. Some of the things like cycle time or processing time and inventory, and those are you'll see them probably in any value stream map out there. There's other ones that you might see in books, but I don't really see them used as often, like EPEI, it's every part, every interval, or tack time. We don't see those as often or frequently. Same thing with the Kanban post. I'd like to see more people use Kanban post, but just probably not one that we usually see a whole lot of. So there's different ways to kind of do it, but the data points I showed you are the ones that we've picked up, like I said, doing this over a decade, of trying to figure out what data makes the most sense and which one should we really be using. Okay, here's a great question. How do you map multiple routings and batches? Oh, that dreaded batching word, unfortunately. Batching. Well, obviously, current state is current state. So if it's multiple routings, we actually, there might be some things like loopbacks. Sometimes it actually goes back. And on a value stream map, we usually just draw coming back around. And then as a data point, we'll put typical or average. How many times does it come back? So it might be something where it loops back maybe 2 times. So we draw the arrow going backwards, just like a loop, and then put 2x there. There's another way that we do this based on where is it going. So like I mentioned before, maybe a certain percentage goes in one direction, the other percent goes another way. So that's one of those helpful tips or tricks to kind of let us know. An example would be, well, if 90% go to this next step and only 10% go to the other one, well, that kind of allows us to focus on the important areas first. Great question. Hey, is Mike going to be available in the future? Yes. Unfortunately, like I said, Mike wasn't available today, but I'm really looking forward to having Mike back so that he can do a session for us, hopefully maybe on the future state map. And I also want to mention Mike Osterling and Karen Martin's new book on value stream mapping is out, and it's actually on sale right now at 5S Supply, so come visit us. You can get a copy of their new book. So they've really, what they've done is they've taken the concept of value stream mapping and what we've learned over the last decade and really updated the information. So hopefully you'll find that very, very a wealth of information there. Okay, what's the best formula to determine the number of people required to process or complete a product? That's a great question. One of the things, especially what I see in office areas, is people obviously are shared resource, meaning that they have to multitask a lot. So one of the things is when we're doing our data boxes, I don't recount that person again, even if they're doing another step in the process. I don't want it to appear that we have more people doing the actual work than actually possible. So if I capture them once in a previous process step, I don't bother to put that again in future process steps. I don't want anyone reading the map to get the impression that there's 20 people doing the work when there's maybe only 4. It just happens to be that they do multiple steps. Now when it comes to the manufacturing area, once again we usually put the number of operators per area or per machine or per process. So if there's 3 on first, 2 on second, and 1 on third, we usually do 3/2/1 just to show the number of people in the different areas. And once again, if I don't get to your question today or you think of something later, just feel free to shoot me an email at tmanis@5ssupply.com. All right, so I just want to thank everyone for attending today's webinar. And once again, I apologize that Mike wasn't available, but hopefully you found what I presented as being informative and giving you some of the tips and tricks to draw better current state maps. So once again, I'd like to thank everyone for attending. Don't forget to visit 5ssupply.com. Thank you very much and have a great day.